Whether or not you're offering a solution to someone or you're thinking of buying a solution, right? It's pretty important to kind of have an understanding of what enterprise IT looks like, all right, at a general level, right? And so today we'll be talking a little bit about the different components in enterprise IT. We won't talk too much about cloud specifically because I think a lot of people are very familiar with it already. But we'll talk about the components that support cloud in general. So let's get started, right? First things first, what is enterprise IT? Enterprise IT is any IT software or hardware that helps business become better, becomes more efficient and productive. In general, all IT and software and hardware is supposed to achieve that. I'm trying my best to include the purpose of it, but yeah, sometimes it doesn't, especially when it's not scoped properly, it can really lead to a lot of wastage and a lot of wasted money. All right. Now, you heard me just now that I don't really want to talk about cloud specifically because a lot of cloud, a lot of you are familiar with cloud already. The point of the cloud model means that customer just needs to buy a subscription from a vendor and they don't need to own any of the infrastructure and components that make a software work in general. All right. And so that is a very important point because that reduces the amount of costs. So what is the cost to the vendor then? So this is where I will share a little bit about that because sometimes even in-house, some companies might have to do it in-house as well, depending on their complexity of their systems, and the price that the vendors have charged them in the first place. So I'm going to go through some of the basic components to help you have a good understanding of this. Okay. So these are some of the base components. They're not complete, they're not exhaustive, but these are some of the base components that we'll be discussing today. All right, and hopefully this will give you guys a viewpoint of what enterprise IT is. All right, and why IT always looks like, oh no, this is not possible, that's not possible. Sometimes they say no to things. A lot of it's got to do with actually the components that they have in their stack, or what we call an IT stack. Over here, what you see, right, is a very simple IT stack. You can take that word IT stack down. It's something that a lot of people in IT use, and it'll be easy to actually communicate with you as well. Okay. We're gonna start off with the first thing, which is the server. Oh my gosh, I'm pretty sure everyone knows kind of plus minus what a server is. A server is basically a super computer. All right. Excuse me. Apologize. So a supercomputer is basically a computer that's able to take many, many tasks from many, many PCs. All right. So it usually has like a shared like software. That it's like an installation of a shared software will usually be installed on a server, and then many, many PCs like in a company will actually access it to work and to share information and yada yada yada. Why not use a PC? Well, PCs are really not meant for this type of transaction volume a lot of the time. So if you have lots and lots and lots of different like people across the globe all accessing it, right, the PC will just crash, honestly. All right. And so it's pretty important to remember that's why the server is used and why the server exists. Okay. And so the other thing is also that the server has some what we call redundancy components, you could say. And what it does is that if like the server suddenly has pieces like key components suddenly stop working, these redundancies can kick in to keep the system going till these other components are fixed. So that's the beauty of the server. All right. So the next thing is the operating system. So the operating system is, yeah, it is exactly what I said. It is. It's basically something that operates the hardware, and everyone's familiar about this, right? When we say operate the hardware, we're talking about turning it on, and also kind of like sometimes also helping to give resource to some of the software that you have that's installed on it as well, right? And so that's pretty important. There are two or to three very kind of, you could say, very popular operating systems for servers in general. The first is naturally the Windows. Everybody knows Windows, right? The second is the Linux operating system. And so many companies will say that it's very stable and all that. A lot of IT people are into that. All right. And the third thing is, a very old operating system called Unix. That's something that is quite like, these are the three that a lot of people are familiar with. And you can absolutely like learn more about them from your IT person, okay, or from your IT contacts, right? And so that's a bit about that. The other thing that is also really important in general is also a database. If you have a ton of transactions, lots of volumes of data, it is important to be able to organize the data in a way that will be easy for people to retrieve it, right? And database software does that really, really well, and helps people to make data the data that they have accessible, right? So it is one of those things that some companies really invest in, especially if they want to learn more about their customer profiles, they want to learn about their customer journeys or their sales journeys, and a lot of the time they would do a lot of, they would use that data management software to do that, to get insights. And this really, really helps to make sure also that the data is used well, and that's good, right? I guess that no wastage of any of the customer transactions that you have, right? And when you do that, you get better decision making in general, and that's good, I guess. Yeah. I would say database, there are like two very big, like, popular database brands in the world. One is SQL. Yeah, that's owned by Microsoft. And the other one is Oracle database. Very, very well used, but I don't really know enough about database to let you know how good they are. But I'll learn, and then I'll make another video and we'll talk about it a bit more, okay? All right. Now, there is another component that's very important, which is called the hypervisor. You would have not heard about this because no one uses this term in general, all right? And yeah, they just don't, all right? It is an important component, especially if you have a server that is like underutilized, right? So maybe you have a server that only has one app on it and it's kind of like it's not fully utilized. There's still a lot of capacity on the server. So what happens is that if you put a hypervisor on a server, right, it can independently partition the server into different environments, allowing you to fully utilize the server's space and capacity. Okay, and so a lot of the time people, as I said before, they don't really use the term hypervisor. In general, what they use is that they use terms like the server is now virtualized, like a server virtualization, for instance, or they'll say like, they'll call the different environments on the server, they'll call it a virtual, they'll call it virtual machines. All right, so that's the story about a hypervisor. So the next thing that we're going to actually talk about will be something that I'm also not very familiar with, but it is quite important, which is called middleware. So middleware acts like a bridge between programs. So, in any organization, many of them would have made a lot of decisions on, different programs that they were bought at different times. Very, very natural, all right, for that to happen. But what happens if those programs don't speak to each other? Like at all. Like they speak a different language, right? Those are the moments when a middleware is really useful to help to create some automation to, have the data kind of flow from one to the next. Of course, you can always have a human doing the translation, but if you have tons and tons of data moving from one program to another, all right, no human want to do it, right, in a sense. And so that's where a middleware will come in. It'll help to automate some of those processes to reduce the amount of work that poor human will have. So I don't want to be that human. All right, so it's something to think about. Middleware is one of those things that are really, really useful because of that. So you can consider it and do some searches on it, because yeah, maybe that's what you need, right? Just some integration between different solutions. Okay. Last layer, right on the top, or we're getting closer to the top, not right on the top, closer to the top, which is applications. Lots and lots of applications everywhere, right? Okay, and so in enterprise IT, applications look like, there are the general ones like ERP, CRM, accounting, like your usual Shopify, which is more of a, front end web store look and all. Those are all considered applications because they are what end users would see, right? For them to perform certain functions, right? So those are what we call applications, all right? Today, what we usually see, many of our applications are available on SaaS, okay? And we can just purchase them as a subscription, okay? The thing to be mindful of is like, that's something that we do, but if you look from the perspective of our vendors, they provide the SaaS solution, but they might be doing it in-house, all right? Okay, as a way to make sure that they have full control over it. Having said that, there are some vendors that provide application services on, as SaaS, but they also buy it as a cloud as well. So it is something that you can always ask, all right, okay? It is a very interesting conversation to better understand your vendor, all right, and definitely a lot of thought around that, but something I'll definitely do a short video on for sure. Yeah, something to talk about. Okay. The next layer is business intelligence, or BI. It was a buzzword long time ago. Now it's no longer a buzzword, seriously. All right, everyone kind of gets what business intelligence is. It's there to analyze data, number one, and number two, present it in a pretty way so that everyone will get insights out of it through their charts, graphs, and yada, 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 yada. Now, there are two different types of models when it comes to business intelligence. A lot of them might not have even any graphs, and the customer needs to build their graphs on and their charts and their templates on their own. All right, that's more traditional in general. These days, there are a ton of templates, right, that are available, that as part of the business intelligence application, and they usually sit on top of the rest of your applications, making sure that you get the best insights possible, right? The thing to be mindful of is really garbage in, garbage out, right? So it really depends on how clean your data is, and whether you have good data in your system in the first place. That's number one. Number two is also whether you have your integration across your different programs to pull into a business intelligence system so that you get the insights you want, right? Okay. And those things don't really require business intelligence specifically. They will need an additional layer within a bigger family called business analytics. So business intelligence is part of this big family called business analytics, and there are other solutions within business analytics that actually can help you do that. So this is where, if you think about it, it's really important to do your research around what you actually need. All right. The graphs, the charts are all really, really nice. But if you don't get that secondary layer right, okay, it's gonna be a big waste of money on your part. Okay. So let's keep going. We're almost there. All right. We've got two more components to go. The next one is about security. It's really, really important in enterprise IT, all right? As it is important in personal computing as well. Like and it shouldn't be taken for granted. All right. Now, when we talk about security, a lot of time we hear about, spyware and things like leaks and, people getting their data stolen. Or those are really, really true and very important. And that's why, company upon company pay tons of money, right, to make sure that there is good security in general on their infrastructure. All right. That's also why sometimes some companies decide not to go on cloud in the first place, because they're just absolutely terrified if their data gets stolen. Okay. And you will hear a ton of different ways that security can be created. Naturally, there's the cyber, there's usually the antivirus stuff, but there's also encryption. All right, there is also other things, like, for instance, making sure that certain profiles don't get access to certain types of data. Those things are also important. So you create profiles and profile management within the organization. All those fall within security. However, what's important here is that they're not part of, you could say that they're not really part of what we call cybersecurity industry specifically. Cybersecurity focuses a lot of antivirus and firewalls and all. The rest of these actually focus on in other parts of, enterprise IT, which encryption, all this, which isn't entirely fully part of that cybersecurity unit. Something to think about, all right? Okay, and you can absolutely check out some of the vendors. Some of them are not purely cybersecurity like companies, right? But they sit within enterprise IT as well. Okay. So something to think about when it comes to security. So make sure you have security. And a lot of companies today will actually kind of like make sure that they have like bank level security encryptions, all right, to become credible to customers. That's actually a really important point. So if you are able to get like, bank level security encryption, it becomes a lot safer and customers feel a lot more comfortable with you. You can absolutely ask vendors for this, all right, so that you don't, you feel safe. Yeah, that's one of those that you can do. Okay. Last but not least, company networks. All right. In the first place, if we have the internet, do we really need a company network, right? Yeah, actually. All right. Because it's easier to share resources when you're in a company network. All right. You're able to share like the printers, you're able to share like basically content where your servers are, that internally. So a lot of the time it makes it, and especially if you have tons and tons of data, a lot of the time some companies actually decide to invest in having a network, right? And more so, okay, so that there's more integration within their own like IT stack, you could say, or IT software. All right. And so some companies opt for that more and more, and usually that's the kind of the go-to way, especially as your company grows. And it does make sense, all right, okay, because it's basically what most people do. It's a good question. Why do we need it? Let's make a video on that and let's find out whether or not a network's really needed, or should we just use the internet. Okay, I'll come back to that with you guys, okay? So in essence, you have this really, really big stack of stuff, all right, okay? And this is how these days, right? Most companies don't see this, right? Most vendors really don't show this to their customers. But it's something that actually, if customers knew about, they would kind of understand what they're paying for, actually. All right, okay. And these are some of it, right? The important thing to remember is that because in SaaS, you would be sharing this with many, many, many customers. In general, there are some specific scenarios where you don't. This shouldn't make the price of your like code or anything go any higher or any lower. But getting to the point of how this is structured, right, can be really, really useful to having a good conversation with anyone in IT. All right, so something to think about. I hope you found this session useful, and I'll come back to you guys in another session on one of these components in depth. Right? Thanks a lot. See you. Bye.